Hey gang, Jane here. Welcome back to another crochet technique tutorial. Today I'm sharing the join as you go slip stitch version of the lacy join method that I used for my little fusion blanket. This join is a variation of my original join as you go lacy join, but this time it's a little extra lacy. When I started joining my little fusion squares, I planned to use my usual method, but these delicate little squares felt like they needed a softer flow between them. So I started experimenting with adding a bit more space in the join, and it created this beautiful lattice effect that fits perfectly with the country garden palette vibe of the blanket. I love when a design evolves as you go. It's part of the fun, isn't it? So today I'll be walking you through the exact method I used to join the blanket. I'll be demonstrating with a 9x9 sample that I worked in purples and greens because you know me, I can't resist a little more color play. For this tutorial, I'll be using a 5mm crochet hook, a pair of scissors, and a darning needle. You're also going to want some form of stitch marker. I use these store-bought ones that open and close, but you could also use a paper clip or just a piece of contrasting yarn. These will be very helpful in finding our way through the join as you go process, and I will show you how to do that along the way. The squares are the little fusion square, and you can find that tutorial over on my channel, and I'll link to it in the description below. I'll be using Aran by Bernat Premium for the entire join, and you can find the color details for the squares that I use. I'll list those in the description as well. I've already prepped my 9 squares for this demo, so whatever you're making, a blanket, a pillow, or a sample, first get your squares ready, and then we can begin to join them together using the lacy join as you go method slip stitch version. Before we jump in, I want to give you a visual overview of how this is going to work. If you followed my other join as you go tutorials, you'll be familiar with how I stack my squares to prepare for the join. This is just a 9x9 sample, so I place my squares in 3 rows of 3. If you were doing the fusion blanket, it'll be a much larger piece of 90 squares arranged 9x10, but it will work for any configuration. So once I'm happy with my layout, I will stack them in numerical order with 1 on top and 9 on the bottom. This will be the order I join them in, always working each row from right to left, then working back along the bottom edge to get back to the right side for the next row to start. The fusion blanket will have a full diagram for this with the larger concept. I will also be referring in the chapter markers to the letters that will walk you through the repeat you use across each row, so it doesn't matter how many squares you have. You will always be working from A through D for each row, repeating to the final square. Then you'll be turning and working back along the lower edge of the row and starting again at the right for the next row, again at the letter A. The first row is a little different as there's nothing to join above it, but the second row is then considered the main row and is worked throughout the rest of the piece, all in one continuous crochet join, never having to break your yarn. So lay out your squares however you like them, stack them up like I've done here, and let's get started. So I take the first square off of my stack, and I'm ready to go here with my yarn and my hook. So we're going to start here in the top right corner of this square, and we're going to slip stitch. So I just pull the yarn up, and this is where A1 begins. So I chain 2. 1, 2, working my yarn in as I go here. Skip over the next 2 stitches and slip stitch in this chain space, and chain 2. Skip over the next 2 stitches and slip stitch in this next chain space. Chain 2. Skip over the next 2 stitches and slip stitch in the next chain space. Chain 2. Now you've reached the next corner. You're going to skip over these 2 stitches, and this is where B1 begins. Slip stitch into the corner, chain 3, and slip stitch again into that corner. And you're going to work your way down the next edge. So let's just take a look at what we did here. See how it gives a nice little scalloped edge? It might feel like it's kind of tight to the edge. You don't have a lot of space when you're working on the outer edges. You'll see it open up once we start joining the squares. If you find you're a really tight crocheter, you might want to chain 3 up here, but give the chain 2 a try and see what you like, because it does give this nice firm little scallop edge on your piece. So coming back, we started B1 before the corner. Now chain 2, and slip stitch in the next chain space. So it's pretty simple, same as what we just did. Chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space, chain 2, and then skip over the stitches and slip stitch in the next chain space, only in the chain spaces, and chain 2. Now we're down to C1 and we're at the next corner. In here we slip stitch and chain 2. That's all there is to C1, pretty simple there too. So now we've worked 2 edges of our square. We're going to flip our square to the wrong side or the back side, and we're going to work our way back up this edge, joining it to another square. So bring in your little stack and take the next square off the top, push that out of the way, and this is where we start joining. So this square, right side facing me, wrong sides of the squares together, and this is where we begin D1. We're going to slip stitch into the front square's corner chain space. Chain 2. Now going to your back square along the edge we just worked, that's what you're going to work into. You're going to slip stitch into that chain space. So skip over that first single crochet and slip stitch into that chain space and chain 2. Come back to the front square, skip over the next 2 stitches and slip stitch in the next chain space. Chain 2. Back to the back square, into the next available chain space, slip stitch, chain 2. Back to the front square, skipping over these 2 stitches, slip stitch into the chain space, chain 2. And we're going to keep working like that. Back square, slip stitch into the chain space, chain 2, front square, slip stitch into the chain space, chain 2, back square, slip stitch into the chain space, chain 2. Now we've come to the corner. We're still working D1, slip stitch into that front corner, chain 2, slip stitch into the back corner that was created here at the beginning of B1, chain 2, rotate your work and slip stitch again into this front corner of the new square, and you are back to A1. That's the repeat that you're going to do all the way across. So let's take a look here. So we started up here at A1, we worked to B1, around the corner, down to C1, over to the new square, D1, and back up to A1. That's what you're going to do for every square that you want to add. I'm just going to add 3 squares in this example, but you can make as many squares as you want in your blanket. You just keep working that repeat, and the chapter markers will have that for you until you reach your last square. So when you reach the final square and you end up here at A1, then you will work A1 and B1. And that's where you'll finish off to start the next part. That's where I will meet you to work the long edge back. Now I'm on my final square. Like I said, I'm only doing 3 because this could be a pillow top, but if I was working a blanket and this was say square 10, doesn't matter which number it is. Final square. I worked A1 and then B1. And here I am at the final corner. And we're going to work around this corner and back along our long edge to get us back to the beginning, to start our second row. So beginning of our long edge, or end of our final row, I guess you'd say first, we do a slip stitch into that corner, chain 3, and slip stitch again into that corner. Now we're going to work along the bottom edge of our square. So you've rotated your work upside down, basically. Still have the right side facing us, but now we're working along the bottom edge of the squares, and I call this the long edge. This is the one you'll use for every long edge going forward. So we start by chain 2 and skip over these 2 stitches and slip stitch in the chain space. So this is very familiar. Chain 2, skip over these 2 stitches and slip stitch in the chain space. Chain 2 and slip stitch in the next chain space. Chain 2, and we've reached the corner. we slip stitch in the corner, chain 2, slip stitch into this chain 2 space that we made at C1, and you want to place a marker in this chain space for when we come back. So grab your markers. I just have these stitch markers. You could use anything, a paper clip, a piece of yarn, and place it in the chain space that you just made by single crocheting into that center C1 section. Now chain 2 and slip stitch into this next corner square and mark that chain space as well. These stitch markers really help you know where you're supposed to be on the way back. So that was the repeat, and now we're going to do it over the next square, and we'll just keep going. Chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space, chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space, chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space, chain 2, and work into that corner same way, slip stitch. Chain 2, slip stitch in the join right here, and place a marker into that chain space you just created. Chain 2, slip stitch in the next corner, and place a stitch marker in there as well. Now we just have to work across our final square. If you have a lot more squares, you'll just do exactly what we've done here. We start after we've done this thing, or the slip stitch, you do chain 2, slip stitch into the next space 3 times, chain 2, work into the corner, and place your markers just like this. So we'll just finish off this square, chain 2, slip stitch into the next chain space, chain 2, slip stitch into the next chain space, chain 2, slip stitch into the next chain space, chain 2, work into your corner, slip stitch. I'm ending mine right here, but if you have more squares, keep on going. So complete your long edge on however many squares that you have, placing your markers, and I'll meet you back here to start row 2. So for row 2, we're going to take our work and rotate it back, right side still facing, and we're going to work our way back for row number 2, which is what I call the main row, because that's the one you're going to be repeating. See, I've got my stitch markers here at the bottom now. And we're going to bring in our next square off of our stack. This will be square number 4 for me. And we're going to hold these 2 squares, so it'll go right here. I pick them up together, so wrong sides are together, and right side of our new square is facing. We begin by chain 2, and then we slip stitch in the front square corner. Now we're at A2. So again, how the repeats were A, B, C, and D. Now we've got this on the second row is A2, B2, C2, D2, and that will be what you repeat all the way across. So I will walk you through them once because they're the same thing. And then you can continue on your own. On the second row, we're joining to the first row. So it's different than the first row. We weren't joining to anything at the top. So now we are. A2 begins with a chain 2. And then we slip stitch in the back square, the edge that we came across, the long edge. You're looking for the first chain space right here. Slip stitch into that and chain 2. And now we start going back and forth. Come back to the front square, go into the next chain space and slip stitch. Chain 2. Back square into the next chain space. Slip stitch, chain 2. Front square into the next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2. Back square into the next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2. front square, we go into the next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, and the back square, we go into the next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, and then we slip stitch into the corner of our front square, chain 2. We go into the stitch marked stitch, the first one that we come up to. We go into that chain space and slip stitch, chain 2, and now we're ready for B2. So I leave the stitch markers in there for now because it helps me understand where I am. We're going to rotate the piece so you're now working down the next edge of the new square. So there's row 1 here, and we've joined our first square to it, and now we're just going to work down this one edge all by itself. And this is B2. We start by working a second slip stitch into the corner and chain 2. Then slip stitch into the next chain space, chain 2. Slip stitch into the next chain space, chain 2, and slip stitch into this next chain space. Oops, everything falls off. And chain 2. That's the end of B2. Now we're moving on to C2, which is a simple little thing here. C2 is slip stitch in the corner at the bottom, chain 2, and flip your piece to the wrong side and bring in your next square off of your stack. Place it wrong sides together, right side of your new square facing you, and you're going to work along these two edges, working them together. So back up where we just worked down. D2 starts here, slip stitch into the front square corner, chain 2, go back to the edge we just worked here and go into the first chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, come back to the front square, next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, and then to the back, next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, front square, next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, and back square, next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, front square into this last chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, back square into the next chain space here, slip stitch, chain 2. So we want to come back to the front square and do a slip stitch in the corner, chain 2. Now we're going to go around this section. This is the trickiest part right here. Look for the next chain space after the one you've worked into behind here. This is actually the corner that we created when we turned at B2, but it does not have a stitch marker in it. You want to go into that one, slip stitch, chain 2. Now you're going to jump to the second stitch marker. So not the one we already worked into, but the next one. Sometimes I take this out, but by leaving it in, it helps me stay oriented to where I'm supposed to be. Don't work into that one. Work into this one, the one that's further away from you. That's the next one to go into. Slip stitch, chain 2. Now you're going to bring your work up at the front here, and you're going to work into this corner again. On the front square, slip stitch into the corner, and you're back to A2. Now let's spread it out and take a look. So now you can kind of see the lattice work happening there. So on our, what I call our main row or a second row, we started here with A2. We worked to B2, around the corner and down to C2, over to D2, and all the way back up and around these stitch markers to A2 again. So from here, you'll be working exactly what you just did here. And you'll work that all the way across for as many squares as you have. Let's take an even closer look at our stitch markers. So at this corner, we went into the corner, Then we went into the corner that was actually created as we came around B2. Then we went over to this stitch marker. We did not work this one because we worked it here. So we went from this corner that got created over to this stitch marker and then back to the corner. That's how we created that. So now you're going to keep adding your squares following those chapter markers that I'll leave in the video. And you will go until you complete your last square. You'll end up here at A2 again. I will come back and meet you on that final square because the A section here and the B section here are a little bit different. So we'll finish this main row together. So here we are at the final square. Again, like I said, I'm only doing 3, but this could be your 10th square. It could be anything, but it's your final square. And you have ended up here at the A2 position. This part here will be just a little bit different because what's happening here is you don't have these stitch markers here. You don't have this join. So it's not a lot different, just a little bit different because you only have a corner there. And then we're just going to come down to this corner and get ready to start our long edge again. So I'm going to pick these up and we're just going to work across this last section to finish our final square. Chain 2, go to your back square on the long edge and slip stitch in the next chain space. Chain 2, front square in the next chain space, slip stitch. Chain 2 and repeat that until you reach the corner. I think you repeat it 3 times on this particular square. So that's our last space on the front square. I love how small these squares are. They work up so quickly. And then on the back square again. Chain 2, work into the corner of the front square. Chain 2, go to the back and work into the corner we did as we started our long edge. Slip stitch, chain 2, and then rotate your work and work a slip stitch again into that corner. That completes that A section. Now we're going to work down the final edge of our final square. Chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space. Chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space. Chain 2, and slip stitch in this chain space. Chain 2. So what we want to do before we start the long edge, we just want to complete this corner. Slip stitch, chain 3, and slip stitch again. And now you have the bottom of your squares facing again, right side facing, but the bottom edge is at the top, and you will work your long edge just like we did here. It's exactly the same. So I'm looking at this upside down. This is row 1 and this is row 2. So you'll want to work your long edge back. It's the same long edge you just did here. Then you'll rotate your work around. You'll be over here and you go into your next row, and every row will be exactly the same as this row 2. So I actually call it my main row because it's the same all the way down. And then when you get to your final row, you will work the long edge again exactly the same way, but you won't need to put stitch markers in. Go ahead and complete every row like the main row and every long edge back the same way. And I will meet you at the bottom corner to complete this final edge on the right hand side that will bring us back to where we started. So I'll meet you there. Okay, I'm on my final corner. So we did row 1, row 2, and row 3, and I came back along the bottom edge here called my long edge. I didn't put stitch markers in because I don't need them. And now I'm going to be starting at the bottom corner of my little piece, but it could be the bottom corner of your blanket. And then I'm going to work all the way up this edge. And really, it's the same thing as what we've been doing, but I will walk you through it. And then we will be complete. So this was my long edge, and I finished in the corner here. Working up what I call my final edge, I chain 3, slip stitch in that same corner again, chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space, chain 2, slip stitch in the next chain space, chain 2, and slip stitch in the next chain space. That's the 3 chain spaces. Chain 2, go to the corner, that's the next chain space, slip stitch, chain 2, work a slip stitch in this chain 2 that you did at the A section. This is at the beginning of the rows. Slip stitch in there, chain 2, and slip stitch in the next square's corner. That's what you're going to do in every single square all the way up the side. The same edging we've been doing all along, and then when you come to this join, you just work right into that join as well. That's going to take you right up to the top corner. I will meet you here. When we reach that top corner, we do a slip stitch in there, chain 3, and you're right back to where you started. And I just do a little slip stitch in the slip stitch. Right into there. Slip stitch it, and we are done. And cut your yarn, and you've got your blanket joined. I often get asked if this join method works with a traditional granny stitch that uses 3 double crochet groups, and yes, it can. Give it a try. I'd probably do a chain 3 on the edges instead of a chain 2, just to give extra space for that extra double crochet because I'm working 2 double crochet groups, but keep the chain 2 for the joining sections. If you do experiment with it, let me know in the comments how that works out for you. I love hearing what you're trying and seeing your variations. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning this lacy twist on my join as you go method. This little 9x9 sample actually makes a great pillow cover. So if you're making the little fusion blanket, you might want to make a few extra squares and create a fun matching cushion. If you'd like the complete pattern for the little fusion blanket, that PDF is in my shop. It includes all the color info for the yarns, charts, diagrams, and full written instructions for both the squares and this particular join method. And if you love playing with color as much as I do, come on over to my Patreon and join me there. This is where I share my behind the scenes color palettes, my yarn experiments, my yarn library of all the yarns that I love to use, and all the creative extras that don't always make it into my tutorials. Until next time, happy stitching. I'll see you in the next video.